First, you must understand the very difficult circumstances that led up to that very challenging event. As I indicated earlier, the ice floe that we were inhabiting was slowly traveling north, until a shift in both wind and tide started pushing us eastward and away from land. Therefore, the collective decision was made that we would move the entire camp to the westernmost part of the floe, prepared to launch the boats. But moving the camp to the westernmost part of the floe meant hauling the boats over some very difficult terrain. Captain Worsley's team was hauling the James Caird, the largest and therefore the heaviest of the three boats. One day we encountered a rather large area of high pressure ridges in the ice, which made the going very difficult indeed. And after 5 hours of back-breaking work in high winds and blizzard conditions, James Caird had progressed by a mere 50 yards. Chippy McNeish was tired. He was tired down to the very marrow of his bones. He was tired here in his position at the rear of the James Caird, and he was angry. Angry at the conditions, and angry at me, I dare say, for giving the order to proceed. But proceed we must, for time at that moment was certainly our enemy. In any case, in a moment of anger and anguish and despair, Chippy simply stepped away from his position at the rear of the James Caird and refused to go on, despite, as you say, a direct order given by Captain Worsley to the contrary. Captain Worsley called a halt to all work and came to the head of the column to inform me of the incident. I gently took Chippy aside and not only reminded him of his duty, but also his responsibility to the rest of the team. Chippy would have none of it. He angrily informed me that since the Endurance had sunk, he was no longer under any compulsion to follow my orders. And what was more, he intended to collect his things and strike out on his own the following day. It was all rubbish, of course. On his own, he wouldn't have lasted a week. But he also knew that he could not return to his team without pulling his own weight. He knew that. Chippy was a good man, a smart man, angry and ill-tempered much of the time, but still a good and smart man. I immediately called a halt to the entire day's work and said that we would make camp for the night, but that we would gather as a group prior to turning in, muster all hands, so that we could discuss the matter as a group. At that meeting, I made no mention of the carpenter's actions, nor did I indicate there'd be any disciplinary action taken. I simply reminded the men of something they already knew. And unless we continued working, thinking, living, breathing as a team, there was absolutely no chance of survival. I then said good night, and all the men retired. Next morning, first person in place to move the James Caird was Chippy McNeish, and we considered the matter closed. Officers, scientists, able-bodied seamen, no one spoke a word. Then on. Still, an interesting moment in the life of the expedition. I hope I've answered your question to the satisfaction of your universe. Mr. McCarthy, who's next?
The next question comes from the Belgian publication De Standaard and its representative, Rich Pedersen. Mr. Pedersen, would you kindly stand and address us?
Mr. Pedersen, I welcome you, sir. Thank you for traveling all this way. What is your question, sir?
Sir Ernest, was that the only instance of insubordination among the crew? And what measures did you take to continually renew the crew's confidence in you?
Well, that's an excellent question, Mr. Pedersen. Please be seated. I didn't think about it first. Mr. Pedersen, I don't think I needed the crew to have confidence in me. I think I needed them to have confidence in themselves and in each other. All I required was their trust. Without their trust, that deep connection, that extraordinary human connection, I dare say Mr. Peabody's happiness or victory would have been correct, and I would have met my demise at some point along the expedition route. And without the men's steadfast belief in themselves, in each other, and in a positive outcome, I believe they perhaps would have expired as well. But if you're asking me, sir, if there were other moments of anger and anguish and despair, of course there were. We all had them, myself included. Because when you're staring into the face of impending doom, Mr. Pedersen, when the mouth of hell opens and bares her teeth, anger, anguish, and despair, those are the responses that are most readily available, aren't they, sir? When the mouth of hell opens and bares her teeth, having confidence in oneself, having confidence in one's colleagues, having confidence in a positive outcome, those things, those responses aren't quite so readily available in the face of impending doom. And so we practiced our optimism. We practiced it every day. We rehearsed it. We stored it away for those moments in time when the mouth of hell would open and bare her teeth. We exercised our optimism much as we trained and exercised the dogs, Mr. Pedersen. Trained it, exercised it, and stored it away for those moments when anger and anguish and despair would separate us from the positive energy of the rest of the group. But in those moments, Mr. Pedersen, in those moments of anger and anguish and despair, once we recognized that energy was separating us, isolating us from the rest of the group, we would then move back towards that group's positive energy, their positive belief. So yes, Mr. Pedersen, anger and anguish and despair, those moments belong to all of us. We take ownership of them all. But I would submit to you that sooner rather than later, we were able to shed those moments and return to the group's positive energy. And when the mouth of hell opens, Mr. President, bears the teeth, the group, and its cohesive, positive power, it's everything. Have I answered your question to the satisfaction of your universe, Mr. Pedersen?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for asking it, sir. Mr.